Arjun stood outside the grand entrance of the airport, his black uniform crisp and spotless. He had spent weeks traveling with the royal family on an important diplomatic mission, ensuring their safety at every step. His role as a royal guard was one of honor, but it came with long hours and exhausting duties. Finally, it was time for him to return home. He had earned a moment of rest, and he looked forward to flying first class, where he could sit comfortably and gather his strength for the days ahead. He approached the airline counter with his ticket in hand and a calm confidence. The line was long, but he walked past politely, knowing that he had a first-class ticket and the right to board. The attendant smiled at him at first, seeing the Royal Guard badge pinned to his chest. "Good morning, sir," said a young attendant, her voice polite but firm. "May I see your ticket and ID?" Arjun handed them over. She examined the documents carefully, typing numbers into the system. Her smile faded as she looked at the screen. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, shaking her head slightly. "First class is full. You cannot board at this time." Arjun blinked, taken aback. "I have a valid first-class ticket. I have traveled with the royal family for weeks. Surely there is space for one more passenger." "I understand, sir," she replied politely. "But the flight is full. There is nothing I can do." Arjun felt a rush of frustration. He had faced dangerous situations before. He had stood on the edge of cliffs, battled storms, and protected the royal family from threats that no ordinary person could imagine. Yet here, at an ordinary airport, he was being denied something as simple as a seat. He looked around and noticed the other passengers. Some whispered to each other, some stared openly. He saw children tugging at their parents' sleeves, curious eyes following him. A few elderly passengers looked irritated, impatient to board. Arjun took a deep breath. He could feel the tension rising, but he reminded himself that patience was as important as courage. "I am a royal guard," he said quietly, showing his badge. "I have duties that require me to travel without delay. Denying me boarding is a serious matter." The attendant shook her head again. "Sir, I cannot change the rules. I have my instructions. First class is full and you must wait." Arjun nodded slowly, but inside he was already thinking of his next step. He did not believe in creating trouble, but he also knew that some rules could not be ignored when they interfered with important duties. He stepped aside, keeping his composure, and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number only a few people in the world would recognize. The phone rang once, twice, and then a calm, deep voice answered. "This is Arjun," he said. "I need immediate assistance regarding a boarding issue. It concerns a royal escort denied access to first class." There was a pause on the other end. The voice sounded surprised but respectful. "Sir, may I ask for more details?" Arjun explained the situation briefly, his tone calm but firm. "I have a valid ticket. I am traveling as a royal guard. The airline staff has refused me boarding. I require immediate action." The line went silent for a moment, and then the voice responded. "Understood, sir. We will handle this promptly. Please remain where you are." Arjun ended the call and slipped his phone back into his pocket. He stood near the counter, observing the chaos that was slowly starting to form. Passengers were beginning to murmur, some impatient, some confused. Children looked around curiously, sensing the tension in the air. The attendant behind the counter typed quickly, trying to figure out what was happening. Her screen flickered and a strange message appeared. "All first-class operations are temporarily suspended. Security protocols are active." She frowned and called her supervisor. "Ma'am," said a colleague nervously, "there is a command coming through the system. It says first-class boarding cannot continue. Security protocols are active." The young attendant's eyes widened. That must be a mistake. "First class cannot be suspended. We have a full flight waiting." Meanwhile, passengers started noticing the announcement on the PA system. "Attention all first-class passengers. Please remain calm. Boarding is temporarily suspended due to security protocols." Some people whispered to each other. Others called their families on their phones. A sense of unease filled the air. Arjun remained calm. He did not panic. He had faced far greater dangers than airport delays, yet he could feel the attention of everyone around him. Some stared, curious about the mysterious guard who seemed unfazed by the announcement. Others exchanged worried glances, unsure of what was happening. He walked slowly along the first-class line, observing the reactions of the passengers. A young woman holding a baby in her arms looked particularly anxious. Arjun noticed her discomfort and gave her a small nod, a silent reassurance. The woman smiled weakly, feeling a little safer in the presence of someone so composed. The airline manager soon arrived, rushing toward the counter. He was a tall man with sharp eyes and a serious expression. "What is happening here?" he demanded. "Why is first-class boarding stopped?" The attendant pointed at Arjun. "Sir, this is the passenger involved. He is a royal guard who claims he has been denied boarding and then—" She hesitated. "Well, some kind of command appeared on the system and all first-class boarding is suspended." The manager looked at Arjun directly. His eyes narrowed. "You caused this disruption?" Arjun shook his head. "I did not cause it. I made a call to report the denial of boarding. That is all." The manager took a deep breath and spoke into his phone. "We have a royal escort here who was denied first class. Verify and confirm immediately." The staff scrambled, checking systems, looking for explanations. The computers flickered, screens froze, and messages bounced back and forth. It became clear to everyone that this was not an ordinary passenger complaint. Passengers began talking among themselves. Some whispered, some recorded videos. A few started speculating about who Arjun was and why his call had such an effect. Children looked around with wide eyes, sensing the unusual tension in the airport. Arjun remained patient. He knew that creating anger or shouting would not help. He stood quietly, observing the growing confusion. He noticed the airline staff running back and forth, trying to fix the problem, yet failing to regain control. Minutes passed, feeling like hours. Then another announcement came over the PA system. All flights will remain temporarily grounded until further notice. First-class passengers, please follow staff instructions. Passengers gasped. Some began calling family and friends. Some children clung to their parents, frightened by the unexpected delay. The airline staff looked stressed and nervous. Arjun finally approached the counter again. His calm presence seemed to command respect. The young attendant who had refused him earlier froze when she saw him approach. "Sir," she said quietly. I do not understand how this happened." Arjun smiled faintly. "Rules are important, but sometimes those who serve others deserve respect first. I do not seek trouble. I only seek what is rightfully mine." The manager, who had returned to the counter after several phone calls, stepped forward. "Sir, we apologize. It seems there was a misunderstanding. Please allow us to correct it." Arjun nodded. He did not speak further. His mission was not to humiliate or punish, but to ensure fairness. The staff moved quickly to offer him a seat, and he was finally escorted to the first-class lounge. As he walked past the passengers, some whispered, some stared in amazement, and a few clapped quietly. No one knew exactly who he was or why his presence had caused such disruption. All they saw was a composed royal guard walking calmly, commanding attention without force. In the lounge, Arjun sat down, finally able to relax. He took a deep breath, feeling the tension drain from his shoulders. Outside, the airport was slowly returning to normal, but he knew that passengers would talk about this day for years to come. The young woman with the baby approached him quietly. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know what you did, but you helped calm everyone." Arjun nodded. "Sometimes we must stand firm and act wisely. Respect and patience can achieve more than anger or force." The woman smiled and returned to her seat. Arjun looked around the lounge. Everything seemed ordinary again, yet he knew that one small action had changed the course of the day. As he prepared to board his flight, he realized the lesson he had taught without saying a word. Courage, composure, and respect for duty could influence even the largest systems. He was not seeking fame or attention. His work was to protect, to serve, and to ensure fairness. Finally, the boarding call came for his flight. Arjun stood up, straightened his uniform, and walked toward the gate. He was ready to continue his journey, knowing that the events of the day had left a mark on everyone who witnessed them. The story of the Royal Guard denied boarding would travel far. Passengers, staff, and even other airline officials would remember the man who had stayed calm, acted wisely, and commanded respect without force. Arjun, ever vigilant, prepared for his next duty, understanding that his influence extended beyond personal comfort. He had made one call, but that call reminded the world that some roles demanded respect above all rules. Arjun had barely taken a seat in the first-class lounge when his phone vibrated again. The screen showed a message from the airline's central operations. It read, "All flights on your flight number are temporarily grounded due to security protocols. First-class boarding remained suspended until further notice. He smiled faintly. His call had done exactly what he had intended. The airline now understood the gravity of denying someone on royal duty their rightful space. While some might have acted with anger, Arjun's approach had been calm, measured, and firm. He knew that chaos could force attention, but control and composure achieved respect. From his seat, he could see the crowd at the first-class gate growing restless. Families were worried, businessmen were anxious, and children looked confused. The airline staff scurried about, trying to manage passengers, but each attempt seemed to make the situation more complicated. Screens blinked with new commands and phone lines rang constantly as the managers tried to override the instructions. One young attendant approached Arjun hesitantly. She seemed nervous but curious. "Sir, can you explain what is happening?" Arjun looked at her calmly. "I made a call regarding my boarding denial. That call has triggered a system alert. It is not my intention to cause chaos. My only goal is to ensure that those who serve with duty and honor are treated fairly." The attendant's eyes widened. She nodded slowly. Understanding that this was no ordinary passenger, she walked away, leaving him alone to watch the unfolding events. Meanwhile, in the airline's control room, panic had begun to spread. Supervisors spoke rapidly over phones, trying to understand the unusual sequence of events. Every attempt to override the first-class suspension failed. Messages that usually took seconds to process were delayed or blocked entirely. Some staff whispered that this might be the result of a high-ranking government intervention, though no one could confirm it. Back at the airport, Arjun noticed a man struggling with luggage at the first-class counter. The man looked frustrated, waving his boarding pass. Arjun stepped forward. "Can I help you?" he asked. The man looked at him, startled. I don't understand. They say boarding is closed. My flight leaves soon." Arjun smiled gently. "The delay is temporary. Please remain calm. The airline staff is managing the situation." The man nodded and stepped back, watching as the mysterious guard returned to his seat. Arjun's presence seemed to calm those around him. Passengers who had been nervous moments before began whispering among themselves, sharing stories of the guard who had caused the airline to halt operations. Some were frightened, others amazed. Minutes passed. Arjun's phone rang again. This time, the call was from an airline executive. "Sir, this is Ravi," the voice said. "We have verified your status and your ticket. Your boarding request is fully authorized. We are ready to provide immediate access." Arjun nodded. "Thank you. I appreciate your cooperation. I also request that families, children, and elderly passengers be assisted first. It is important that no one suffers due to the delay." Ravi hesitated. "Sir, that is unusual. But we will follow your instructions." The line went dead. Arjun looked up at the gate. Staff had begun organizing passengers based on his recommendations. Families with children were guided to priority seating. Elderly passengers received assistance. Business travelers who had been impatient earlier now waited quietly. The chaos that had threatened to grow had been replaced by organized calm. Among the passengers, stories began to spread quickly. People whispered about the royal guard who had seemingly stopped the airline with a single phone call. Children were fascinated by the tale, imagining a hero who could influence powerful systems with ease. Adults debated whether such a thing was even possible, but no one questioned the results. Every screen, every announcement, and every staff member was now working under the influence of that one call. At the counter, the young attendant who had denied him boarding earlier felt a mix of fear and respect. She watched as the airline manager spoke rapidly into his phone, his voice tense. Every message seemed to acknowledge Arjun's authority and the unusual power of his intervention. Arjun remained composed. He did not need to raise his voice or threaten anyone. His calm demeanor commanded attention. Passengers noticed this and began observing him quietly. Even the staff, who were accustomed to handling hundreds of difficult situations daily, seemed unsure of how to act. His presence alone had changed the atmosphere of the airport. Outside, the runway was crowded with airplanes waiting for clearance. Pilots and ground staff monitored their systems anxiously. Messages from the control tower repeatedly confirmed the security protocol in effect. The airport was at a standstill, and yet there was no panic. The tension was silent but palpable. Arjun saw a young boy sitting alone on a bench looking worried. The boy's mother had been delayed by the suspension, and he did not understand what was happening. Arjun walked over and knelt beside him. "Are you okay?" he asked. The boy nodded slowly, clutching his toy airplane. I want to go home. Why can't the plane leave? Arjun smiled gently. Sometimes things happen that are out of our control. But those in charge are working to make sure everyone is safe and treated fairly. You will go home soon. The boy looked up at him and nodded again. There was a quiet confidence in the royal guard that seemed to comfort the child. Arjun patted his shoulder lightly and returned to his seat, knowing that even small gestures could calm those around him. Inside the control room, executives were still struggling to regain full control. Every attempt to override the protocol failed. Screens flickered with automated messages, and staff checked lines of communication repeatedly. It became clear that Arjun's call had triggered a network of emergency protocols, designed to prioritize safety and important personnel. The airline manager, realizing the gravity of the situation, decided to act quickly. He approached the gate where Arjun waited. Sir, we apologize for the delay, the manager said. We are ready to provide immediate boarding for you and any passengers requiring priority. Arjun nodded. Thank you. Please ensure that all passengers are treated fairly and that families are assisted first. The manager hesitated, then smiled. Understood. Your instructions will be followed. As boarding began, passengers watched in awe. Some whispered excitedly to each other, sharing stories of the mysterious guard who had caused the airline to halt operations and then restore order. Children pointed toward Arjun, curious about the calm, composed man in the uniform. Arjun walked slowly through the lounge, observing the reactions of passengers. Some smiled at him in gratitude, others simply stared in amazement. He remained quiet, focusing on the task at hand. Once on the plane, he took his seat in first class. The cabin staff treated him with utmost respect, ensuring that he was comfortable and that all amenities were provided. Arjun looked out of the window at the busy airport below, reflecting on the events of the day. The story of the royal guard denied boarding would travel far beyond the airport. Passengers, staff, and even airline executives would remember the calm man who had stopped an entire system with a single call. Yet for Arjun, the day was not about fame. It was about duty, fairness, and respect. As the plane began taxiing toward the runway, Arjun thought about the young boy and the families he had helped. One small action, guided by calm and composure, had brought order to chaos. He knew that such actions mattered more than recognition. The engines roared to life, lifting the airplane into the sky. Outside, the city grew smaller, the airport bustling below. Inside, passengers settled into their seats, some whispering stories, others simply observing the calm royal guard. Arjun leaned back, allowing himself a moment of relief. The journey was not yet over, but the lesson had been made clear. Courage, composure, and respect could change outcomes, even in the most complicated situations. Throughout the flight, passengers continued to discuss what had happened. They speculated about who Arjun was, how he had caused such an unusual delay, and why the airline had complied so quickly. Some were skeptical, others fascinated, yet all agreed that the day's events had been extraordinary. Arjun remained focused, quietly preparing for the next phase of his mission. His duty had not ended at the airport, and he knew that each action, no matter how small, had consequences. By remaining calm and acting with respect, he had ensured that fairness prevailed. The plane continued on its path, cutting through clouds and sky. Below, the airport resumed normal operations, slowly recovering from the unprecedented halt. Passengers would leave with stories to tell, but Arjun understood that true impact was measured not in attention, but in the lives touched and the order restored. As night fell, he looked out at the horizon, feeling a quiet satisfaction. One call had created ripples across a large system, reminding everyone that even in a world of rules and regulations, wisdom and composure held more power than anger or force. The royal guard, seated quietly in first class, knew that the day would be remembered, not for the chaos, but for the calm and decisive action that had restored fairness. Arjun understood that influence was not about control, but about ensuring justice and order wherever duty required. And as the plane soared higher, passengers whispered the story among themselves, fascinated by the man who had changed an entire airline's operations with patience, wisdom, and a single call. While the plane was preparing to depart, Arjun's influence had already begun to ripple throughout the airport. Outside the first-class lounge, passengers continued to react to the events that had transpired. Some whispered anxiously, unsure of what had caused the sudden halt, while others shared stories of the royal guard whose single call had affected the airline's entire system. Children clutched their parents' hands, curious and sometimes frightened, as the tension lingered in the air. Airport staff moved quickly, trying to restore order. Supervisors called team meetings on the spot, instructing attendants and security personnel to follow special instructions. Lines were reorganized, announcements were made repeatedly, and new priority lists were created for families, elderly passengers, and travelers with urgent needs. Yet despite their efforts, the sense of chaos remained. Every attempt to regain normalcy seemed to highlight the extraordinary nature of the situation. Arjun, sitting calmly in the first-class lounge, watched the commotion with quiet attention. He did not rush to intervene. He had learned long ago that control was achieved not by force but by presence and careful planning. Still, he noticed the strain on the staff and the confusion among the passengers. He knew he had to act wisely to prevent panic from spreading. A supervisor approached him nervously. "Sir, we are trying to manage the passengers, but the systems are not responding as expected. What should we do?" Arjun looked at him steadily. "Remain calm. Organize the passengers according to priority. Families with children and elderly travelers must be assisted first. Ensure that no one panics. Communicate clearly and politely. The rest will follow." The supervisor nodded and returned to the counter, repeating the instructions to attendants and security personnel. Slowly, the situation began to stabilize, although tension still lingered. Passengers watched the staff scramble, some with curiosity and others with growing frustration. Outside the lounge, a group of business travelers gathered, speaking in low voices. "Who is this guard?" one man asked. "How can one call cause all this disruption?" A colleague shook his head. "I have no idea, but it is clear he has authority. Even the airline managers are following his instructions." The story of Arjun spread quickly throughout the airport. Staff in distant gates whispered about him, while passengers in lounges shared accounts of the mysterious guard who had caused the airline to halt first-class operations and then restore order with calm instructions. Children created little stories in their minds, imagining him as a hero who could control entire systems with a single phone call. Meanwhile, the airline's control room was still buzzing with activity. Engineers and IT specialists worked rapidly to understand the anomaly that had occurred. Messages were being sent back and forth between managers, supervisors, and airport staff. It became clear that the system had been triggered by a high-priority protocol, designed for emergencies involving government officials or important personnel. One senior engineer spoke to his team. "This is not a typical error. The protocol override is responding to a valid authorization. Whoever made this call has credentials recognized by the system. We cannot interfere without risking serious consequences." Back at the gate, Arjun noticed a young woman struggling with a stroller. She looked exhausted and frustrated. Without hesitation, he stepped forward to assist her. "May I help you with your luggage and stroller?" he asked gently. The woman looked at him in surprise. Yes, thank you. We were delayed and I am not sure how to manage all this." Arjun guided her to a priority line, ensuring she was comfortable and secure. Other passengers watching him began to whisper quietly. They saw a man who, despite his power to influence an entire airline, chose to help those in need first. It was not just authority that impressed them, but compassion and wisdom. Nearby, a young boy tugged at his father's sleeve. "Dad, who is that man?" he asked. The father looked at Arjun and shook his head. "I don't know, son, but he seems important. Everyone is following his instructions." Arjun smiled faintly as he adjusted his uniform. His calm presence continued to have a subtle but powerful effect on the airport. Staff were organized, passengers were guided efficiently, and panic was kept at bay. Yet the chaos outside the lounge remained. Flights were delayed, luggage was piling up, and airline officials struggled to regain complete control. An announcement came over the PA system. "Attention all passengers. Please remain calm. First-class boarding is currently suspended due to security protocols. Staff are assisting families and passengers with urgent needs. We apologize for the inconvenience." Some passengers sighed, frustrated by the delay. Others muttered in confusion, trying to understand the unusual instructions. Children clutched toys or hugged their parents, sensing the tension but trusting the adults around them. Arjun's phone rang again. He answered, hearing the voice of an airline executive. "Sir, we have received multiple complaints from passengers. Some are concerned about delays and lack of communication. How should we proceed? Arjun responded calmly. Continue assisting passengers according to priority. Families, children, and elderly travelers must receive attention first. Communicate clearly and politely. Maintain composure at all times. The rest will follow. The executive paused. Understood, sir. We will follow your instructions carefully. Meanwhile, at the control room, engineers were working to trace the source of the call. Every attempt to bypass the security protocol failed. It became clear that the protocol had been triggered by a verified royal authorization, granting immediate priority to the caller. The airline staff realized that this was no ordinary passenger complaint. Back at the lounge, Arjun noticed a young girl sitting alone, looking frightened. She had lost sight of her parents in the commotion. Without hesitation, he approached her and knelt down. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. The girl nodded slowly, her eyes wide. "I can't find my parents," she whispered. Arjun smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry. We will find them. Stay close to me." He guided her toward a staff member who could assist in locating her parents. The girl's face lit up with relief as she held his hand briefly before being led to safety. Passengers continued to watch Arjun's actions quietly. They noticed that he did not boast or demand attention. Instead, he acted with patience, calmness, and authority. The mysterious guard had created order in chaos, and his presence alone reassured those around him. At the first-class gate, the airline manager approached him once more. "Sir, your instructions are being followed. Boarding will begin shortly for all authorized passengers." Arjun nodded. "Thank you. Please continue to prioritize families and those in urgent need." As boarding resumed, passengers moved in an organized manner, following staff directions carefully. The chaos that had threatened to escalate was now under control. People whispered among themselves, amazed at the transformation that had occurred in a short period of time. Outside the lounge, staff began to assist passengers with their luggage. Security personnel ensured that lines were orderly, while attendants guided children and elderly travelers to priority areas. The airport slowly regained a sense of balance, though the memory of the disruption lingered. Arjun walked through the lounge quietly, observing the reactions of those around him. Some passengers smiled in gratitude, others stared in amazement. Children whispered stories to each other, imagining a hero who could influence powerful systems with calm authority. In the control room, executives continued to monitor the situation. They were impressed by the efficiency and composure demonstrated by both Arjun and the airport staff. The unusual event had provided lessons in crisis management, showing how leadership and calmness could restore order, even in challenging circumstances. Meanwhile, the young attendant who had initially denied Arjun boarding approached him cautiously. "Sir, I am sorry for the misunderstanding earlier. I did not realize the importance of your role." Arjun looked at her kindly. "Mistakes happen. What matters is how we respond. Calm and respect can resolve situations better than anger or force." The attendant nodded, her expression filled with understanding and newfound respect. She returned to her duties, ensuring that passengers were guided efficiently and politely. Passengers continued to board the flight, some still curious about the guard who had influenced the airline system. They whispered among themselves, speculating about his identity and the power of his actions. Children imagined him as a hero, while adults debated the extraordinary events that had unfolded. As the plane prepared to take off, Arjun settled into his seat. He looked around at the passengers, noting their reactions. Some were relieved, some impressed, and some still whispered quietly about the mysterious royal guard. He leaned back, allowing himself a moment of calm reflection. The events of the day had demonstrated the importance of patience, wisdom, and authority guided by fairness. Arjun had used a single call to bring order to chaos, but he knew that true influence came from composure, not force. Outside, the airport continued to operate, slowly returning to normal. Flights resumed, luggage was delivered, and passengers moved efficiently through security and boarding areas. Yet the story of the Royal Guard would linger, told and retold by those who had witnessed it. Arjun thought of the families, the children, and the staff who had been affected by the delay. One small action, guided by calm and patience, had transformed the entire experience. He understood that influence was not about power alone, but about ensuring fairness, respect, and order wherever it was needed. Arjun sat in his first-class seat, calm and composed, as the airplane ascended into the sky. Outside the window, the airport grew smaller, lights flickering against the evening darkness. He knew that his actions on the ground had already made waves throughout the airline. Yet he understood that the story was far from over. The true impact would unfold in the days ahead, as the airline management processed the unprecedented events. Back at the airport, the control room was still buzzing with activity. Every executive and manager was on high alert, trying to understand how a single call from a passenger could trigger the suspension of first-class operations. IT specialists reviewed logs, network engineers traced connections, and supervisors coordinated with ground staff to ensure that all operations were returning to normal. Despite their efforts, the airline could not ignore the reality. A royal guard had effectively shut down a major system with one phone call. The airline's CEO, a tall man with a stern expression, entered the control room. His team quickly briefed him on the situation. Screens displayed sequences of alerts, communications logs, and staff actions. The CEO listened carefully, his eyes narrowing as he realized the magnitude of the incident. "This is unprecedented," he said. A single passenger, a royal guard, was denied first class, and the entire system responded with emergency protocols. Why was this not handled earlier? We need to understand every detail. One of the senior managers spoke up. "Sir, it appears that the passenger holds verified credentials recognized by our security protocols. When boarding was denied, he contacted the designated line for high-priority personnel. Our system automatically triggered emergency measures to ensure the safety and proper treatment of such individuals." The CEO rubbed his temples. So one call halted first-class operations and affected multiple flights. "We cannot allow this to happen again. We need a detailed report and a review of protocols. But at the same time, we cannot ignore that he handled the situation calmly and effectively. Our staff responded appropriately, and passengers were eventually assisted." Meanwhile, airport staff continued to share their experiences. Flight attendants and supervisors described how the calm and composed Royal Guard had guided them indirectly, helping them prioritize families and those in urgent need. Passengers were amazed at how quickly order had been restored. Outside the control room, the passengers who had witnessed the events still whispered among themselves. Stories spread quickly through social media, with videos of the announcements and the confused staff circulating online. People speculated about the identity of the Royal Guard who had disrupted operations, yet remained composed and respectful. Some imagined him as a hero, while others marveled at his influence. Back on the airplane, Arjun noticed the reactions of the passengers around him. Some were still talking quietly, trying to piece together the events that had unfolded. Others were observing him curiously, wondering how a single call could have such a significant effect. Yet Arjun did not seek attention. He focused on remaining calm, understanding that composure and presence were far more powerful than showing authority or creating fear. The cabin crew approached him with polite questions. "Sir, we wanted to ask if everything was comfortable. Did you need any assistance during boarding?" Arjun smiled gently. "Thank you. Everything is fine. I only ask that passengers are treated fairly and with respect. That is the most important consideration." The crew nodded, impressed by his calm and thoughtful demeanor. They continued their work efficiently, ensuring that all passengers received appropriate care. Back at the airport, the CEO convened an emergency meeting with top managers. "We need to analyze every step," he said. How did the system respond to a single call so quickly? Why did staff comply without resistance? And most importantly, how do we ensure that our protocols support fairness while avoiding unnecessary disruptions? A senior IT executive replied, "Sir, the system was designed to respond to high-priority authorizations from verified personnel. The Royal Guard's credentials triggered the protocol, which automatically prioritized his boarding and ensured that staff followed the instructions carefully. The system also flagged any attempts to override it as a security risk." The CEO nodded slowly. "This is both impressive and concerning. We must refine our procedures, but we also need to recognize that the Guard acted with fairness and composure. Our staff responded properly and passengers were assisted efficiently. The lessons here are clear. Calm authority and well-designed systems can restore order in difficult situations." Meanwhile, airport staff returned to their stations, sharing what they had witnessed with colleagues. Some passengers approached attendants to ask questions. "Who is that man?" one woman asked. "How could one person influence everything?" A young attendant smiled faintly. "He is a royal guard." He did not seek attention, but he acted calmly and with authority. His presence alone guided our actions. Children continued to imagine him as a hero, crafting stories of his courage and influence. Adults debated how one person could affect an entire airline system, yet all agreed that the day had been extraordinary. Back on the airplane, Arjun looked at the city lights below. He reflected on the lessons of the day. One call had created a ripple that extended far beyond the boarding counter. It was not about power or control. It was about using authority wisely, ensuring fairness and acting with calm and composure. The flight continued smoothly. Cabin crew moved efficiently, passengers settled comfortably, and the tension from the airport gradually faded. Yet the impact of Arjun's actions would be remembered for a long time. Airline staff would recount the day to colleagues, managers would reference it in meetings, and passengers would share the story for years to come. As night deepened, the CEO received reports from multiple departments. Staff described how the Royal Guard had indirectly guided their actions. Passengers had remained calm due to clear communication, priority assistance had been provided, and no incidents had occurred. The CEO realized that while the situation had been unusual, it had also highlighted the importance of composure, fairness, and proper protocol. Meanwhile, airport security shared their experiences with the control room. They had observed the Royal Guard calmly assisting passengers, ensuring that families and children were guided properly. Even staff members who initially resisted his instructions had complied quickly after seeing his composed presence. In the lounge, passengers continued to discuss the events. Some shared videos online, others called friends and family. Stories of the Royal Guard spread across social media, capturing the fascination of people far beyond the airport. They marveled at how one person, with calm authority and fairness, had influenced an entire system. Arjun remained composed throughout. He did not react to the attention or speculation. He understood that influence was not about recognition, it was about ensuring fairness, safety, and proper order. By remaining calm and guiding others indirectly, he had achieved what many could not have done through force or anger. As the flight continued, he noticed a young woman struggling to comfort her baby. He offered a gentle smile, and the crew quickly provided assistance. Passengers watched quietly, noting how he combined authority with empathy. This quiet guidance had left a lasting impression, teaching everyone that calmness and respect could achieve remarkable results. Back at the airport, staff began reviewing procedures for high-priority personnel. They studied the logs of the Royal Guard's call, analyzing how the system had responded and how staff had managed passengers. Everyone agreed that while the situation had been extraordinary, it had also demonstrated the importance of preparedness, composure, and fairness. Passengers who had witnessed the events left the airport with stories to tell. Children created imaginative tales of a heroic Royal Guard, while adults discussed the lessons learned. Airline staff reflected on the importance of following instructions and providing priority assistance efficiently. The incident became a reference point for future training and crisis management. As the plane flew above clouds, Arjun thought about the ripple effect of his actions. One call, made calmly and with purpose, had caused a sequence of events that ensured fairness, restored order, and demonstrated the importance of composure. He understood that true leadership was not about asserting power, but about guiding others with respect, patience, and clarity. The cabin lights dimmed, passengers settled into comfortable silence, and the airplane moved steadily toward its destination. Yet the story of the Royal Guard would continue to travel, shared by passengers, staff, and even airline executives. Everyone who had witnessed his calm authority had learned a valuable lesson. Composure and fairness could create lasting influence. Arjun leaned back in his seat, observing the quiet satisfaction of the passengers. He knew that his role as a Royal Guard extended beyond protection. It was about ensuring justice, fairness, and respect wherever he went. One call had disrupted a system, yet that disruption had ultimately restored order and fairness. The flight continued smoothly, and Arjun's mind remained focused on his duties. He understood that influence was measured not by recognition, but by the lives impacted and the order restored. Every small action mattered, and the calm authority he demonstrated had shown the power of patience, fairness, and presence. The airplane hummed steadily as it soared above the clouds. Arjun leaned back in his seat, calm and composed, observing the passengers around him. Many of them still whispered about the events that had unfolded at the airport, fascinated by the Royal Guard whose single call had disrupted an entire airline system. Children imagined stories of heroes. Adults debated the extraordinary sequence of events, and airline staff marveled at how one person could influence a system so efficiently. Arjun did not seek attention. He understood that the true impact of his actions was not in the stories or videos being shared, but in the fairness, calm, and order that had been restored. He reflected on the lessons of the day. Composure and patience had guided his decisions. Empathy had shaped his interactions with passengers, and respect for duty had ensured that his actions created positive change. In the cabin, a young family sat nearby. The mother held a baby while the father tried to calm a restless toddler. Arjun noticed their struggle and signaled to the flight attendants. Within moments, they provided extra blankets, toys, and snacks, helping the family settle comfortably. The parents glanced at Arjun, surprised and grateful. His subtle guidance had ensured that even the smallest needs were met during a challenging situation. As the flight continued, more passengers approached him quietly. Some wanted to express gratitude. Others asked questions about how one person could influence so many. Arjun listened patiently, offering gentle smiles and simple words of reassurance. He emphasized the importance of patience, calm, and fairness, teaching lessons without speaking loudly or seeking recognition. Meanwhile, back at the airline headquarters, the CEO convened a comprehensive meeting. Reports from the control room, airport staff, and flight crews were reviewed in detail. The unprecedented event had caused disruption, but it had also demonstrated the effectiveness of clear protocols and composed guidance. The CEO addressed his team. "We must acknowledge the efficiency and composure demonstrated by all involved," he said. "The Royal Guard acted with patience, fairness, and authority. Our staff followed instructions carefully and passengers were assisted efficiently. This is a case study in leadership, crisis management, and calm authority." The airline executives studied the communication logs. They noted how a single verified call had triggered high-priority protocols. The call had temporarily suspended operations, but it had also ensured that staff focused on fairness and passenger safety. Engineers and managers worked together to refine protocols, ensuring that future high-priority calls would be managed efficiently while avoiding unnecessary delays. Back on the flight, Arjun remained quiet, observing the ripple effect of his actions. Passengers who had initially been anxious were now calm, children were smiling, and families were settling comfortably. The airline staff continued their duties efficiently, guided indirectly by Arjun's composed presence. A flight attendant approached him with a question. "Sir, we are still curious about your role. How did you manage the situation so calmly and effectively?" Arjun smiled gently. "Authority is most effective when combined with patience and fairness. Acting with composure and helping others ensures that outcomes are positive. Anger or force rarely creates lasting change." The attendant nodded thoughtfully, impressed by the wisdom in his words. She returned to her duties, motivated to guide passengers with calm authority in the future. Meanwhile, passengers shared stories quietly. Some took notes on social media. Others described the experience to fellow travelers. Everyone agreed that the Royal Guard had handled a challenging situation with remarkable composure and respect. The events of the day would be remembered not as chaos, but as a lesson in calm, fair, and efficient leadership. Outside, the airplane continued its smooth flight. The city below grew smaller as night fell. Passengers relaxed, watching the dark landscape lit by occasional city lights. Some children whispered to their parents, imagining adventures of a heroic Royal Guard who could influence entire systems with a single phone call. Adults debated how calm authority and fairness could produce outcomes more powerful than force or anger. Back at the airport, staff reviewed the events of the day. Supervisors discussed the importance of following protocols carefully, assisting passengers efficiently, and maintaining composure during unexpected challenges. Lessons from the Royal Guard's actions were incorporated into staff training programs, emphasizing empathy, patience, and fairness in every interaction. In the control room, Engineers finalized reports on the high-priority protocol that had been triggered by Arjun's call. They analyzed the sequence of events, documenting how the system responded and how staff followed instructions. The incident became a case study for emergency management, demonstrating how calm, verified authority could ensure fairness while restoring order during unusual situations. Meanwhile, passengers who had witnessed the events shared their experiences widely. Social media posts, messages, and videos circulated quickly. People marveled at the Royal Guard's composure, his empathy for families and children, and his ability to influence a complex system without causing fear or anger. The story spread across cities, inspiring others to act with patience, fairness, and calm authority. Arjun continued to observe the passengers around him. He noticed a young girl drawing quietly in her notebook. She looked up at him and smiled shyly. He nodded gently, appreciating her small gesture. It reminded him that even simple actions like kindness and calm guidance could have a lasting effect. The cabin crew maintained a high level of service, ensuring that passengers' needs were met. Some approached Arjun quietly, asking for advice on managing challenging situations calmly. He offered simple guidance: observe carefully, act with patience, prioritize fairness, and help others whenever possible. His words were quiet but impactful, leaving a lasting impression on those who heard them. Back at the airline headquarters, executives continued reviewing protocols. They studied how high-priority calls should be managed, how staff should respond to verified credentials, and how passenger needs could be prioritized efficiently. The events of the day became a reference for future planning, emphasizing calm authority, fairness, and effective communication. Meanwhile, passengers continued to reflect on the experience. Some discussed how a single call had caused disruption but ultimately restored order. Others shared stories of how the Royal Guard had assisted families, helped children, and guided staff with quiet authority. Everyone agreed that the lessons of patience, composure, and fairness were more important than the temporary disruption itself. Arjun, seated quietly, thought about the broader implications. One call had created ripples that affected staff, passengers, and airline operations. His calm and composed actions had not only restored order, but also set an example for others to follow. He understood that true influence came from fairness, patience, and guiding others without force or anger. As the flight approached its destination, the captain made an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened. We appreciate your patience and cooperation during the flight. Passengers quietly followed instructions, preparing for landing. Some looked out the window, observing the lights of the city below. Others whispered stories of the Royal Guard who had transformed a chaotic situation into an orderly and fair experience. Arjun remained calm, watching the reactions of those around him. He noted the subtle changes in passengers' behavior. Children were calmer, adults were more thoughtful, and staff moved efficiently with renewed confidence. His presence had left a lasting impression, demonstrating the importance of composure, empathy, and fairness. Finally, the airplane touched down smoothly. The cabin lights brightened, and passengers prepared to disembark. Airport staff guided travelers efficiently, applying lessons learned from the earlier events. Families were assisted first, children were helped with luggage, and elderly passengers received priority attention. Arjun collected his belongings and prepared to leave the plane. Cabin crew approached him one last time, offering thanks for his guidance and composure. "Sir, you have taught us valuable lessons today," one of them said. "Your calm and fair actions have left a lasting impact on all of us." Arjun nodded politely. "Thank you. Remember that patience, composure, and fairness are powerful tools. Use them wisely and they will guide you through challenges." As he walked through the airport, passengers and staff alike noticed his calm presence. Some whispered stories, others smiled quietly. The legend of the Royal Guard who had shut down an airline with a single call continued to grow. Yet Arjun did not seek recognition. His focus remained on his duty, on fairness, and on helping others whenever possible. Outside the airport, the city lights glimmered. Passengers dispersed, sharing stories, reflecting on the lessons they had learned, and imagining the calm, composed guard who had influenced an entire airline system. Children created imaginative tales, adults debated the events, and staff prepared to apply the lessons in their work. Arjun stepped into a waiting vehicle, ready to continue his journey. He thought about the ripple effect of his actions, understanding that one calm, fair, and composed decision could influence countless people. His role as a royal guard was not only to protect, but also to ensure that fairness and order